Hail Internet, it's Matt here for the Dork Lords. If you're new to the channel, welcome. We talk about all manner of dorkly things here, so whether it's sci-fi, fantasy, superheroes, we probably have a playlist about it. Feel free to check us out. Today is another in our Dork Lord of the Rings segments. And today's topic is actually about a figure that Tolkien referred to as a renowned Amazon. A somewhat obscure figure from the first age of Tolkien's mythology, named Lady Haleth. I came upon Lady Haleth when I was actually researching the Helm Hammerhand video. You can check that out a couple of weeks back. The son of Helm Hammerhand was Haleth. That actually led me into the Haleth, son of Hama, the little kid that's talking to Aragorn in the Two Towers. Aragorn tries to give him the little pep talk. Well, we're all going to get through this. And then little kid Haleth never seen again. But in any case, that Haleth was not the same as Haleth, son of Helm. And while I was researching Haleth, son of Helm, who had lived 250 years earlier in the Third Age, I came upon this other Haleth. And I thought, I started following this other Haleth. It's Lady Haleth. No relation. But very interesting story. And one of the heroines of Tolkien's story, and he doesn't have a lot of heroines. He's got Eowyn, Luthien, Galadriel, Arwen, but not really a giant pantheon of female heroes. This is one of them, Lady Haleth. To break it down first, let's talk about the House of Haleth, what becomes known as the House of Haleth. They are the part of the Edain. The Edain are humans in the first age. They wake up way in the east, and 3 tribes of the Edain decide to journey. They travel west, and eventually they come into kind of the lands of the elves. They befriend the elves, and these 3 different tribes get their own names. There's the House of Beor, what becomes known as the House of Haleth, the second house, and the third house is the House of Hador. So, at the point before Haleth exists, they're called the Haledon. So the Haledon travel off to the west. They end up basically becoming squatters in elven territory. They don't really ask permission. They're like, we're going to take up in these forests. These'll do. And this is in the first age, in the year 312 of the First Age. So again, the First Age, thousands of years before the War of the Ring. This is a long time before the events of Lord of the Rings. First Age, 312. Here they are. The Haledon take up residence in the forests that actually belong to Caranthir. Caranthir the Dark. Caranthir the Dark is an elf. He is one of the sons of Fëanor. I'll do a video on the Sons of Fëanor. I've talked about them tangentially with some other videos because they do have a lot of webs in a lot of stories. But essentially, they're not really known for their nice temperaments. And this particular son of Fëanor has a reputation of having the worst temper of any of the sons of Fëanor. But he doesn't seem too bothered by this little group of humans that are hanging out in his forests, so he basically lets them be. Meanwhile, Morgoth, seeing these various tribes of humans coming in and dwelling near and with the elves, decides, I need to take out these guys before they become too big a threat while they're still weak. And so, in the case of the Haledon, Morgoth sends an army of orcs to wipe them out. And this is in the year 375. Haleth is born in 341. She has a twin brother. They are born to this Haldad is their father. 375, when the orcs attack, the Haledon are really leaderless. They don't have a really well-organized society. And so it's Haldad, who's Haleth's dad, steps forward to take leadership, builds a stockade, and the orcs essentially lay siege to this small group of Haledon led by Haldad in their stockade. And I'm going to read to you passage. This is Tolkien writing about this time and these people. Haldad had twin children, Haleth, his daughter, and Haldar, his son. And both were valiant in the defense, for Haleth was a woman of great heart and strength. But at last Haldad was slain in a sortie against the orcs, and Haldar, who rushed out to save his father's body from their butchery, was hewn down beside him. Then Haleth held the people together, though they were without hope, and some cast themselves into the rivers and were drowned. But 7 days later, as the orcs made their last assault and had already broken through the stockade, there came suddenly a music of trumpets, and Caranthir with his host came down from the north and drove the orcs into the rivers. All right, so there you go. We hear Tolkien now describing Haleth having a great heart and strength. She is helping in the defense of this stockade. Her dad is killed off on a sortie, and now there's no one left to lead. The dad and the son dead. She decides, all right, I'm here, let's do this. So she assumes the mantle of leadership and holds out for 7 days while the orcs are attempting to basically slay them all. Eventually, the orcs break down the stockade. They're almost about to wipe the Haledon off the map, and Caranthir the Dark shows up to save the day. However, in this moment, Caranthir is really impressed with the valiant way that Lady Haleth held this group together and the valor shown by this particular tribe of humans. He had underestimated them. And like, they're humans, whatever. But now he's like, oh, well, actually, maybe these are good to have around. So he offers them a fiefdom in his lands. And it's interesting. Lady Haleth basically says, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. Somewhat, politely, but says, no, we're going to find some of our other kin that have traveled west of here. Good day to you. We'd rather be in control of our own destinies. So she basically rebukes this elven lord, and she and her people continue to travel. They seem to be fairly nomadic generally. They, as I mentioned, they traveled west even to get to this spot, and along the way, occasionally some of their members decide, I've gone far enough, I'm just going to stay here. And so you have some of their remnants hanging out in the White Mountains, in the Blue Mountains, and I'll talk about the descendants in some ways of House Haleth at the end of this. But just so you know, they're a fairly nomadic folk. And she leads them on this very, something like an exodus. So she takes them through some fairly dangerous lands. Morgoth still is imprisoned in Angband, but he's got connections on the outside, and there are orcs that are doing his bidding. And it's a tricky time to be hanging out in the wild. So some of their numbers get reduced just through the hazards of traveling. Eventually, Lady Haleth sets up shop in the forest of Brethil. And this is under the domain of King Thingol. King Thingol is Luthien Tenuviel's father. I've talked about him in some other stories. He's got his own interesting parts to play in some of these myths, but he sees a bit of an opportunity because he's got this thing called the Crossings of Tieglin. It's a river crossing. It's a bottleneck, and it's on the road to some very important places. And he's like, oh, you know what? If these folks could defend the forest and that river crossing on my behalf, that would be great. But he doesn't really trust them, and so he's not sure whether he's basically asking them, would you defend this against orcs? Or would you, I think the implication being, or would you just join with the orcs and attack me, or let them attack me? Like, what's your allegiance here? And so Lady Haleth sets him in his place, and she says, to this Haleth answered, where are Haldad, my father, and Haldar, my brother? if the king of Doriath fears a friendship between Haleth and those who have devoured her kin, then the thoughts of the Eldar are strange to men. So she's basically saying, my family was killed off by these orcs. We hate them. How could you possibly, question whether we would, join in some kind of allegiance with the orcs? So in any case, Thingol agreed. They have the forest of Brethil, and they guard the crossings of Tieglin. Haleth lives to about the age of 80. She dies in the year 420 of the First Age. She's one of the few rulers of what becomes the House of Haleth to actually live a normal lifespan. Over half of the lords of Haleth, the lords of the Haledon, are killed violently in battle. So she, despite the fact that she's in a lot of combat, it's a testament to her abilities that she's able to eventually die of fairly natural causes. They make a barrow mound for her, the Lady Barrow, otherwise known as Howth an Arwen. Arwen, as we know, Lady Arwen. There's no relation there except that the term means lady or high maiden, Arwen, and that's hence Arwen's name. But Howth an Arwen, the Lady Barrow, is where her people honored Lady Haleth in the forest of Brethil. Here's another passage that Tolkien writes about their lifestyle. These are the people of the House of Haleth. It says, "For they were chiefly concerned to protect their own woodlands, and they excelled in forest warfare. Indeed, for long even those orcs specially trained for this dared not set foot near their borders. One of the strange practices spoken of was that many of their warriors were women, though few of these went abroad to fight in the great battles. This custom was evidently ancient, for their chieftainess Haleth was a renowned Amazon with a picked bodyguard of women." So it is a matriarchal society. She's a renowned Amazon. She's got a female retinue bodyguard, and they are apparently very, very capable of fighting in forests and woodland combat. So they defend that region very, very well. As I mentioned, she dies off of natural causes at age 80. She does not have children of her own, so the lordship passes to her nephew. But all told, there are only 8 lords of the House of Haleth. It's a very short-lived house. It's almost doomed from the start. She is pretty much the only thing that holds this tribe together. Their high point is definitely during her rule. After she goes, within 80 years, the house is completely destroyed. You've got a few events that come up. Dagor Bragollach. That's when Morgoth, ends the siege of Angband very violently, kills a bunch of folks. The House of Haleth is not involved in that battle, but they do become involved in the follow-up battle, the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. And at that point, the current lord of the House of Haleth dies in battle. Later, lordship goes to Brandir the Lame, who I actually mentioned him briefly in my Glaurung video. He's connected with the Turin Turambar myth and the House of Hurin. The House of Hurin is that third house I was talking about of the 3 houses, the 3 tribes of the Edain. One of them was House Hador. Well, House Hador has Hurin in it, and he's going to play a part in the destruction of the House of Haleth, because this is 499 of the First Age. Turin, which is Hurin's son, shows up and basically takes kind of unofficial lordship of the Forest of Brethil, of the House of Haleth. The actual king, or the actual lord, I keep saying king, the actual lord is Brandir the Lame, but the unofficial lord is Turin. Turin eventually, in a fit of anger, kills Brandir and is kind of brought to shame for it. Turin then also kills himself, impales himself on his own sword. And so it's after this time, Hurin, Turin's dad, who has been imprisoned by Morgoth for 28 years, after Turin dies, and also Hurin's daughter has died, commits suicide in the Forest of Brethil, Hurin is released, and he goes in search of his kin. He finds the grave sites of his kid Turin, his daughter, right there in the Forest of Brethil, and also his wife dies in his arms, essentially, in the Forest of Brethil, and he, in his grief and anger, he blames the House of Haleth for not somehow, treating his family better. And so this is, Hurin, in his anger, starts this civil war that essentially destroys the stronghold that the House of Haleth has in Brethil and kills off all of the potential heirs. So by the year 500, the House of Haleth is gone. It's decimated. And in fact, the other two houses, the House of Beor and the House of Hador, I'm simplifying this a bit, but they unite and end up becoming the Númenóreans. They go to the island of Númenor, and the Númenóreans are mainly formed from the houses of Beor and Hador. The middle house, the House of Haleth, kind of goes boop, disappears. Although interestingly, Yarandil, the hero Yarandil, who is Elrond's dad, he does have a bloodline from all three of those houses, all three of the Edain. I should mention quickly as well that one of the little idiosyncrasies of the House of Haleth was that they lived in peace with the Druedain, the Droog. You might even call them like the fourth tribe of men. They were the uncivilized, the woes, the wild men. And they lived in harmony with the House of Haleth, journeyed with them, and that was an interesting relationship that the two of them had. We do see some little hints, the descendants of these Druedain show up in The Lord of the Rings. It is when Theoden and the Rohirrim are trying to get to Minas Tirith to save Minas Tirith from falling. They have to go through these forests, and it's the Druedain led by Gonberry Gon, their leader, who show them the secret ways through the forest because the forest trails are being patrolled and blocked by orcs. And so were it not for the Druedain, Theoden would not have been able to arrive at Minas Tirith in time to actually lend any aid. So kudos to the Druedain in that moment. It's this tragic house, the House of Haleth. But as I say, their heyday was during the time that they were run by this obviously very brave, very proud, and very capable heroine, Lady Haleth. I mentioned that I would talk about how the descendants of the House of Haleth play into the Lord of the Rings. So, as I mentioned, the house is gone, but there are some descendants, especially as they traveled. I mentioned during their journeys, occasionally people would just stop traveling. They're like, we're going to stay here, thanks. My back. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, so there were little pockets of this House of Haleth all throughout Middle-earth. And by the time of the Lord of the Rings, there are three particular groups of interest that have a connection to the House of Haleth. One of them are the Men of the Mountains, the Oathbreakers. They're the Paths of the Dead folks. They are House Haleth. And, I mean, they're precursors to the House of Haleth, I should say. But they're of that tribe. If you remember really quickly, they're the ones that Isildur called upon. They broke their oaths. They were cursed to a half-life, and then Aragorn gave them the chance to meet their oaths by aiding him in the War of the Ring. They did so, and he freed them. But they have ties to the House of Haleth. A second group that's important in the Lord of the Rings that has connections to the House of Haleth would be the Men of Bree. So you got the Inn of the Prancing Pony, Barleyman Butterbur, connections to the House of Haleth. He's from that tribe. the lost second house of the Edain. So yes, the men of Bree are also connected. And then the third, maybe the most interesting, are the Dunlendings. So the Dunlendings, if you remember in the Fellowship of the Ring movie, you've got that bit, Crabine from Dunland! Legolas looks up, sees the flock of birds, and gives the Crabine from Dunland quote. Crabine, they're large crows, essentially, raven-like creatures. The flock of them are flying. Crabine from Dunland, what he's suggesting is, Saruman is sending his spies. We need to hide. Because Dunland is in very close proximity to Isengard, where Saruman dwells, and the Dunlendings had cast in their lot with Saruman because they hated the Rohirrim, essentially. And so Saruman pushed on that and said, "Yay, if you join me, we can kill lots of folks from Rohan." So what makes that particularly interesting is the Dunlendings, if you go back that 250 years to when Helm Hammerhand was king of Rohan, Helm is off in the east defending the borders right before the long winter. And while he's away, he leaves Haleth, his son, basically on the throne at Meduseld, guarding Edain. The Dunlendings take the opportunity. Oh, look, while the king's away, the Dunlendings will play. And so Wulf leads an army of Dunlendings. It's an allied army of various people that hate Rohan, but they're led primarily by Dunlendings. And they swoop into Edain, and they end up killing Haleth, son of Helm, pretty much at the gates, the front gates of Meduseld. They kill him, and Wulf takes the throne temporarily until he's dethroned. So what you've got is a situation where the Dunlendings, who are connected through their heritage to Lady Haleth, daughter of Haldad, kill, many, many thousands of years later, Haleth, son of Helm. And so there's the link of the two Haleths there. Anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, so there you go. It's just one of those awesome subplots that could go. I mean, you could make a whole big giant story about this if you wanted to. And Tolkien has just sprinkled all of these amazing stories into his overall narrative. And it's what makes, the Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion just come to life so well. Figures like this. Lady Haleth, Tolkien's renowned Amazon. So there you go. If you've got a topic you'd like me to talk about, feel free to put it in the comments. Be happy to do a video about a topic of your choosing. Thanks so much, everybody, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye now.